Hey everybody, back for another retro review, and this time this is my salute of the entire Mortal Kombat franchise. I've been a huge fan of the Mortal Kombat franchise since 1996 for its brutal, intense gameplay, graphic violence, story, and large and colorful cast of characters. As you can see by the thumbnail here, um, I got my start with the Mortal Kombat franchise with the Mortal Kombat 3 series, Mortal Kombat trilogy, Mortal Kombat trilogy. Like I said, when I first played this game, see, when I was younger, um, I had never been exposed to. I never had video games. I never had video games. I mostly went over other people's houses to play to play um to play video games. And as for television, I watched a lot of cartoons, a lot of action oriented and comedy, a lot of different variety of cartoons, but no cartoon no cartoon was as dark or as violent as the Mortal Kombat the Mortal Kombat video games, movie, and of course the Bruce Lee movies, which also introduced me to a whole new world of violence, and I've been hooked. I've been hooked on Mortal Kombat ever since I played this video game, Mortal Kombat Trilogy. I love this video game for not only for its graphic violence, but for its large and colorful cast of characters. And then later, when the movie came out, its in-depth in-depth storyline and I love all the Mortal Kombat games with Mortal Kombat 3 all the way up till 8 being the best, and Mortal Kombat 1 all the way up till 8 being my favorites. I can't stand Mortal Kombat 9 or 2011, and of course the sequel to that, Mortal Kombat X or Mortal Kombat 10. I hate both of those games. But this right here is about the original timeline and the spin-off video game Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe. Um, like I said, the Mortal Kombat 3 series is where I got my start with Mortal Kombat 3 with the Mortal Kombat series. A friend of mine had an N64, and one of the earliest games released on the N64 was Mortal Kombat Trilogy, the final update to Mortal Kombat 3. And then a year later, I finally bought a Sega Genesis, and I bought Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 because Trilogy wasn't on the Sega. For the Sega and Super Nintendo, it was Mortal Kombat 3 and Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and I played Mortal Kombat 3 and Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 in the arcade various times when I went to the arcade. There's a mall near where I stay. There's a mall which used to have an arcade, and they used to have Mortal Kombat and several other games around there. They used to have several other games, and I remember the arcade being much better, the arcade being much better even back then than the console video games, than the console Mortal Kombat games I had. Around this same time, I was still, well, before I get to that, um, and then of course, that same friend of mine, whenever I went over his grandmother's house, we always played downstairs with the N64, but in his bedroom, I think in what was his bedroom upstairs, he had a Sega Genesis hooked up, and this is where I got to play Mortal Kombat 2, which was awesome. Not as cool as, I didn't think it was as good as the Mortal Kombat 3 series, but Mortal Kombat 2 I thought was an awesome game. It was cool seeing the earlier actors the earlier actors and the original character designs of the characters before they were heavily redesigned and recast for Mortal Kombat 3. You saw Ho Sam Pak as Liu Kang. Um, John Parrish still portrayed Jax, but he didn't have his signature metal arms. Johnny Cage had a completely different actor and had white sneakers to go with his black pants and blue shin guards. And of course Daniel Pesina portrayed him, whereas in the Mortal Kombat 3 series, Chris Alexander took over the role of Johnny Cage. And of course, seeing the original designs and the original actors for Sub Zero, Scorpion, and Reptile. It was a highly exciting game. Like I said, not as good as not as good as the 3 series, but still awesome. Then a friend of mine, in Charlotte, North Carolina, in Charlotte, I think North or South Carolina, actually a cousin of mine, had a Sega Genesis, and here's where I got to play Mortal Kombat 1, and this game right here was awesome, and it was cool to see where the franchise started and where the early inspiration for the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie came from, which I also saw around this time. I remember seeing trailers in '96 for the VHS of Mortal Kombat 1995, and I couldn't believe that what was just a video game was already now a blockbuster movie. And seeing the first Mortal Kombat movie, the Mortal Kombat movies, both the first one and the second one, are two of my all-time favorite films, and both of these are still good, are still entertaining, and are still fun to watch today. And to this day, probably when it comes to accuracy in video games, are the best, stay the closest to their source material. Where nowadays you get films that don't even follow their source material, but Mortal Kombat is by far one of the closest to the source material. And this movie, and it was, you don't know how awesome it was, back in '95, seeing all the fatalities and special maneuvers from the game, and seeing characters like Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Kano, Sub Zero, Scorpion, Shang Tsung, Goro come to life. Then I saw this in '97. I finally got to see the VHS in '97. Then around that same time, the trailer for the sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Mortal Kombat Annihilation released, and this was an adaptation of Mortal Kombat 3 with elements from 2, and then then Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I actually like. I love both Mortal Kombat films, but if you force me to choose, I actually like Mortal Kombat Annihilation more than Mortal Kombat 1, because Annihilation, while they had to scale back in the budget, which is, that's actually the problem with both of these movies nowadays, is the budget. You need more than 30 million or 20. You need more than 30 million or 25 million bucks, $25 million to produce a Mortal Kombat film. But when I saw Mortal Kombat Annihilation, everything that made Mortal Kombat 1995 good, they took it and multiplied. Mortal Kombat Annihilation had a much better story, had a large had an even larger cast of characters, better costumes, better costumes, and even more content and scenes and stuff from the video game. And even though this film was hated by a lot of people, I still like this film today and can still consider it one of the best films I've seen. Both of them have their problems, but they're still two of the best films still the best films I've ever watched. And for a while, I waited for the sequel to Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and I actually thought both of these movies were canon, since the games focus more on gameplay than story. But when I got older and played the sixth generation Mortal Kombat's, then of course discovered Wikipedia. Learned I managed to separate the games canon from the movie and television series canon, which is my next thing. Around the time I saw Mortal Kombat Annihilation, I also rented a VHS from Blockbuster of the Mortal Kombat Defenders of Earthrealm series. So I cannot believe, and of course, the Mortal Kombat The Journey Begins animated special that served as a introduction to the 1995 Mortal Kombat film. I cannot believe what was once a game was now a movie and two cartoon series, and man, it was awesome. While being toned down, both of these cartoons and movies still captured the essence and the spirit of the Mortal Kombat games, and while deviating in some instances, still stayed true to the Mortal Kombat games. And once again, because the the movies and cartoons probably had more storytelling than the games did, than the video games did. I actually mistook this stuff for being canon. Once again, it wasn't until I got older where I managed to separate them from being canon. And sadly to say, Mortal Kombat: Defenders of Earthrealm, I finally got to, and I finally got to finish watching the series when I discovered Wikipedia, when I discovered YouTube, and I got to finish the series, and series is so awesome. Sucks it only got canceled after 13 episodes, but at the same time, that makes me admire the series more. They managed to get that much story. They managed to get that much story out of just 13 episodes. It makes me wish, but at the same time, it still makes me wish they would have had more, where they could have adapted Mortal Kombat 4, 5, 6, and 7, and hell, even 8. Hell, even 8. It would have been cool to see them cross over with the DC characters. They were even teasing a crossover with the Street Fighter cartoon from the Street Fighter franchise. But like I said, this was an awesome cartoon. Back in '97, around the time I discovered Annihilation, the cartoons, the Mortal Kombat movies, the cartoons. I also um I also discovered the existence of. I'll talk about this later. I also discovered the existence of a new machine, Mortal Kombat 4. When I saw Mortal Kombat 4, a 3D Mortal Kombat, I was blown away from the realistic, for the darker storyline, the realistic violence, the fast-paced 3D action, and the characters. In the previous Mortal Kombat games, they used storyboards. Here in this Mortal Kombat game, no, they didn't have no story modes. They have full length motion capture 3D cutscenes with the characters walking, talking, running, jumping, fighting, and interacting with each other. And you don't know how blown away I was seeing what was previously a 2D game was now a 3D game. Back in '97, I was still playing 2D games while the rest of the video game industry had moved on. The only 3D games I had played at that time were the Killer Instinct franchise, were the Killer Instinct and Donkey Kong Country, created by Rare. These were the first two 3D games I've played. I was still playing 2D games at that time. 2D games at that time, and Mortal Kombat 4 is one of the other games that will lead me to upgrading to the PlayStation when the Mortal Kombat 4 came home to arcades. And one other thing I loved about Mortal Kombat 4, the home version had a practice mode. Which the practice mode gave me the ability. The practice mode gave me the ability to not only play Mortal Kombat 4, but to become good and play Mortal Kombat. To play Mortal Kombat. Prior to playing Mortal Kombat 4, I was not good at Mortal Kombat. I could never advance up the ladder. Now I can beat the ladder, and sometimes, not all the time, the game is still hard. It's easy to learn how to play, but tough to master. I can sometimes beat the tournament ladders. Sometimes beat the tournament ladders undefeated. Where previously I couldn't get past either the other combatants in the game. When I got past the other combatants in the game, I couldn't get past either the endurance match, or the boss characters, Motaro or Shao Kahn, especially Motaro. Or in Mortal Kombat 2. Mortal Kombat 2, for a while I couldn't even get up the ladder without losing. Now I can at least make it to Kintaro before losing. I had to use a cheat code. to beat Mortal Kombat 2. I can actually beat it now without the cheat code sometimes. And Mortal Kombat 1, I can't. It's Mortal Kombat 1. If I can get past the endurance mode and Goro, I can actually beat the game. So I'm much better now than I used to be. Thanks to Mortal Kombat 4, they give me the ability to learn how to play the Mortal Kombat game. And with Mortal Kombat 4, for all the other modes they have an endurance mode where you play as two modes. You can play as the traditional tournament ladder where you choose your destiny, choose your ladder, and fight your way up the tournament. Fight your way up the tournament with and fight your way up to the tournament in single round combat. In single round combat with the same health bars. So they don't. So unlike in the normal arcade mode, when you enter the next fight, your health bar is not replenished. You got to fight with that same weak health bar. So your goal is to fight through the tournament ladder without taking hits, without um, taking hits, which I still can't beat. I still can't beat that now. I still can't beat. I get as far as Goro and lose. Then the second endurance mode is a mystery endurance mode where the screen goes black and you don't get to see your opponent. The game chooses an opponent for you. Then of course you got Mortal Kombat. Then of course you got then of course you got a multiplayer tournament mode where you can play up to I think 8 players, eight up to 4 or 8 players, 1 to 4 or 8 players. And when you beat the game, when you beat this tournament mode, it shows the characters holding a belt and a skull. I think a belt and a skull, a red skull, which is the signature of this video game. The red skull. A red skull is that's the signature mascot for this game. Besides the dragon logo, and and the and when you beat the game, the various character endings, which shows the characters interacting with each other. So Mortal Kombat 4 was probably the best Mortal Kombat game of all. Was probably the best Mortal Kombat game of all time. And then of course the cheat codes which gave you the ability to play as Goro, a boss character, Noob Saibot, and another lame character named Meat. Another lame character named Meat. And another code which allowed you to with a weapons code which allowed you to fight with weapons and actually keep the weapons. This game also gave you the ability to not only dodge but take out weapons. But if you get hit, the weapon will drop. You can also throw the weapons, and you can also throw other objects like boulders or red skulls at people during certain levels. During certain levels. Then of course the fatalities look more realistic. The fatalities in the old Mortal Kombat games look incredibly fake and cartoonish now. The fatalities here look more gruesome and more realistic. And there was also a code which gave you one button fatalities. I thought that was pretty cool. Instead of taking the time to learn all those buttons for a fatality, they gave you a code which gave you one button fatalities. So like Mortal Kombat 4 was probably the best game of all. Was probably the best game of all time. And Mortal Kombat in my opinion is much better. As much as I love the 2D era of Mortal Kombat with the live action digitized actors, the digitized live action actors, I prefer Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat in my opinion is much better in 3D. It's much better in 3D. Then of course around this same time on the PlayStation, I also played Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, which despite the criticisms and despite the difficulty, I love this game. I can never beat it. I had to use a cheat code to beat it. I love the gameplay, even though there were some bugs, such as when it came to turning the right way. I love the gameplay. I love the level design, the music, and I love the live action cutscenes with the characters, in the game, I wish the old Mortal Kombat would have had either live action cutscenes or even more story modes in between the tournament ladders. Um, but sadly to say, Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, I accidentally cracked the disc, so you have to probably download a ROM or go online and buy this game again for either the PlayStation or the N64. Um, Never got to play Special Forces. Never got to play Special Forces. Uh, and for a while, um, and for a while I awaited the next Mortal Kombat game, which will become Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. And when I finally got a PlayStation 2, this was one of the mini games. This was one of the mini games I bought a couple of years. I got this. I got Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance 3 years after it had released, when the price went down. And you don't know how blown away I was from for uh, for um for the new gameplay. Blown away. Unlike one of the things I always loved about Mortal Kombat, unlike previous Mortal Kombat games, unlike other fighting games have this: if it's not broke, don't fix it. So they'll keep the same fighting engine for every game. Mortal Kombat up until the ninth Mortal Kombat 9, they um they did this thing that if it's not broke, they did this thing where this is good, but how can we do it better? They tried to make each Mortal Kombat game bigger and badder than the last. And for the new generation, they got rid of the side scroller arcade style fighting and replaced it with arena style combat similar to Virtua Fighter, Tekken, and Soul Calibur. And Ed Boon has said numerous times. I remember reading somewhere 10 years ago that of his competitors, Tekken is his all-time favorite competitor when it comes to the other fighting game competitors. I love, first of all, I love the 3D arena style combat, being able to being able to move in circle instead of side to side or dodging it like in Mortal Kombat, dodging and plane stepping like in Mortal Kombat 4. I love the 3D movement, and of course I love the 3D movement. I like the new fighting styles in the old Mortal Kombat games. Apart from their signature maneuvers, their fatalities, their back kick, their roundhouse kick, and their power level, everyone fought the same. Or in their combos in Mortal Kombat 3, but everyone fought the same. Everyone fought the same. It wasn't until Mortal Kombat 5 where they gave each character three individual fighting styles, two hand-to-hand combat styles, and a sword style, and a weapon style, and a weapons and a weapon style. And I love the small but colorful cast of characters and the brand new in-depth story centered around the Deadly Alliance. Quan Chi and Shang Tsung form an alliance and take out the two people strong enough to stop them, then begin a plan to resurrect the Dragon King's undead army. The Dragon King's undead army. Returning to the game were Sub Zero, Kung Lao, Johnny Cage, Sonya, Kano, 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 and new characters include Kenshi, Lee Mei, Boraicho, Melvado, and of course returning as Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, who are both two boss characters and are playable in this game. In this game, other new characters include Moloch, the first boss character you face, a giant ogre-like demon you face before you face the deadly alliance of Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, and of course, other new characters include Draman, Suai Sho, who the Black Dragon member, Kira, I think the Vampire Lady, I already forgot her name, the Vampire Lady, and other returning characters include Jax and Raiden as hidden characters. The only thing I hated about Deadly Alliance was the hoops you have to go to unlock all the other characters in the game, and the crappy conquest mode, which is some lame hero journey mode where you're some monk, but you choose one of the characters from the game to learn the fighting moves. I thought this was lame. I wish they would have had a cinematic story mode to connect the character stories into one story. Then the next game, Mortal Kombat Deception, improved on Deadly Alliance. This video game, while virtually the same as the last one, they added the ability to knock your person onto a new plane, and they made it look more realistic, like an actual fight. They added booby traps. They added booby traps, or like what I heard one guy say, what I heard Gaming Sin say, stage brutalities, where you get to knock your person off a cliff onto some spikes, knock your guy knock your guy into some fire, and knock the guy onto some flaming cubes that burn the guy and squish him before he can get off the cubes, and another one where you can knock a guy inside a dragon's mouth, and the dragon will come down, and the dragon's teeth will come down and chomp on him. So the stage brutalities, I love the stage brutalities, and I love the new in-depth story centered around Shinjinko and Unaga, and I love the new, and I love the colorful cast of characters. Once again, the roster is small this time, but you got a brand new, unique cast. Returning are Nightwolf, Cabal, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Ermac. New characters include Cobra, Darius, Daru, Daru, and Ashura. Uh, um, Ashura also returning is Baraka and Melina. Melina. Um, Boss characters include Noob Smoke, a tag team of Noob Saibot and Smoke, and Unaga, the Dragon King himself, one of the hardest bosses in Mortal Kombat video games. Unaga, the Dragon King. Unaga, the Dragon. I've just recently beat him after several years of trying. I've had this game for about 9 to 10 years, and I finally beat Unaga after several years of trying. Um, I also like. I don't like the conquest mode, even though it's much better than the last game. It's an RPG where you go around once again collecting items, learning moves, talking to other people, and fighting. But you do get to see the story of Mortal Kombat this time, and in this time they connected each character's storyline um into one storyline. Into one storyline. What I don't like about this game is the crypt with all the unlockable stuff returns in this game, and 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 in the crypt most of the time I just get alternate costumes and comic book artwork, comic book artwork and sketches when I want the other hidden characters in the game, such as Dark Raiden, Zombie Liu Kang, Noob Smoke, Havoc, Kira, um, Boraicho, and all the other slaves of Unaga, and all the other characters who, of course, are now slaves of Unaga locked in a prison stage. Um, then, of course, there's Mortal Kombat. Then the last game, Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which, in my opinion, I like all three Mortal Kombat games, but if you force me to choose, Mortal Kombat Armageddon probably has to be the best Mortal Kombat game of all time. Mortal Kombat Armageddon, while the gameplay is the same as the last two, there's not much you can do to really improve the gameplay of the first two Mortal Kombats. Mortal Kombat Armageddon, they have every character who's appeared in Mortal Kombat from Mortal Kombat 1 all the way through 7. Mortal Kombat 1 all the way through 7. The only downside is that this time, instead of having three fighting styles, you only have two now. You only have a hand-to-hand fighting style and a weapon style to avoid repetition of the characters fighting with the same styles. Fighting with Simpsons, but every character who's ever appeared in Mortal Kombat is back in this game with heavily new redesigns. Some of them good, some of them bad. Some of them good, some of them bad. Then of course, I love the brand new storyline centered around Blaze, Taven, and Dagon, and I love how they give you the ability to play as every Mortal Kombat character since this was the pretty much the final Mortal Kombat game of the sixth generation. They went out with a bang, and I love the new story mode here. It's much better than the last two. Instead of the crappy hero journey mode of the first game and the RPG mode of the second game, this one has an action adventure game reminiscent of, according to Wikipedia, is similar to the video game Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, which I've never played. which I've never played. But this game reminded me of God of War, which I was playing around this time. With God of War around this time. Love the new story mode centered around Taven and Dagon. Dagon. After this, they took. After this, they took 2 years off. They took 2 to 3 years off to make a new Mortal Kombat game, and that Mortal Kombat game would be Mortal Kombat versus DC, which I think is one of the best and most underrated Mortal Kombat games of all time. While this game got mixed reviews when it came out, this game has been criticized, especially by hardcore Mortal Kombat fans, for toning down the violence, toning down the violence and the lack of unlockable content. But I thought this video game right here was one of the best fighting games. Is one of the best fighting games of all time, and in my opinion, one of the best fighting games of the seventh generation. You know how blown away when I heard that Mortal Kombat was crossing over with the DC Universe characters. A lot of people had a problem with that. I never did. Mortal Kombat is pretty much all of those martial arts fantasy, all of those martial arts movies combined with dark fantasy, combined with GI Joe, Marvel, and DC. If you mix all that together, you get Mortal Kombat. You get Mortal Kombat. So I never had a problem with Mortal Kombat crossing over with DC or Marvel, sort of like what Street Fighter did what Street Fighter and Capcom did with Marvel. I never had a problem with that, because that's what Mortal Kombat is, in my opinion. Mortal Kombat is, in my opinion. They look more like Marvel and DC in the newer games, in the modern day video games. Hell, even Warner NetherRealm Studios, formerly Midway, recently released Injustice: Gods Among Us. So Mortal Kombat versus DC. This game right here. I was blown away. First off, I love the new gameplay while keeping the combat of the last three Mortal Kombat games. They made some changes. They got rid of the fighting styles and replaced it with a couple of mini games. One where you get to knock your person in the air and you battle in the air with your goals to land as many punches or many punches and kicks or signature maneuvers as you can before you hit the ground. Another mini game mode where during the city stage, the metropolis stage, you get to take the guy and run him through the wall like Superman, and another close-up combat mode where you come up close together like in boxing or MMA and fight each other. Your goal is to land as much hits as possible. And there's a new mode called Rage mode where you press the L1 and R1 buttons, and you get this gold power where the character gets angry and becomes immune to physical attacks for a short couple of seconds. So like I said, another awesome video game. Another awesome video game, and while the roster is small, the roster is great. Another thing I love was that unlike other crossover games, they have a storyline, but it's mostly these fighting games, fighting game characters coming together for one game. This Mortal Kombat went beyond that. They actually came up with an in-depth story on why the Mortal Kombat and DC characters were encountering each other. I thought that was pretty cool, and I thought Mortal Kombat versus DC was much better than the next two Mortal Kombat games made by NetherRealm Studio. Of course, I'm gonna end the Mortal Kombat video here, because like I said, I enjoy Mortal Kombat 2011 and Mortal Kombat X, but I do not like either one of these games. I like the original timeline and the alternate timeline, Mortal Kombat versus DC universe, better. All of these games barely had a story. Mortal Kombat up until at least around 5 or 6 barely had a story, and I thought the story and timeline was better than the current Mortal Kombat storyline. Also, before I leave, around just recently, in the early 2000s, I discovered the existence of some Mortal Kombat comics. First off, you have the Canon series, which acts as a prologue to Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, produced by Midway. And then, of course, you have alternate retelling of Mortal Kombat, an alternate world reimagining of the Mortal Kombat franchise, the Mortal Kombat comics produced by Malibu, the Malibu Mortal Kombat Blood and Thunder and Battle Wave comics. Then, of course, you have Most recently now, you have the Mortal Kombat X comics. Mortal Kombat X comics. I've been searching for these comics for since the early 2000s, and finally, thanks to a guy named Mortal Kombat Comics, I finally got to read these comics and comics from several other video games and franchises. Alright, well, this was my salute of Mortal Kombat. I'm out.